you, those who are accessing your online copy can take a look at the draft there. I'm going to walk through it, but if you'd rather have a paper copy.
I would need one of those. Yep, thank you.
No problem. So just a few things I wanted to walk through on a follow up from last time. So just to bring you up to speed, what we've been doing is updating the master plan kind of chapter by chapter. So currently we're on the transportation chapter. We've been working on it for a while, not so much reviewing the drafts. I mean, we have these, but we've been going through some different issues, getting input. There's a lot of information here, so I'm not going to walk through it all, but you can take a look at it, kind of at your leisure. There's some other documents that are also up, which is probably good for everybody to refresh on the site. But some of the things that we've been doing is doing traffic counts. We've looked at, we did a warrant analysis, which I'll talk about for a possible signal. We've looked at alternatives for traffic calming, a number of different things that we've looked at and talked about. So we're getting kind of close to finalizing the chapter. So I just wanted to touch on a few key things. But before I kind of dove into that, hopefully everybody saw just a couple of documents I also added. One was this, and I just put this up here because we had previously talked about, this is just a paper copy, if anybody wants it. If anybody wants one. And I just, put this up. This actually came out of the last master plan, and this was the latest version of the circumferential highway to make it into the 10-year plan. It was a reduction from what was once the complete one. So this is no longer, as we mentioned, the 10-year plan. This is not a project that's moving forward. But just for the sake of interest, this is what it would have done. It would have, obviously come into Litchfield, really straddling the Hudson Town line. There would have been an interchange with 3A. It would have then crossed the river to Merrimack, where there would have been an interchange with DW Highway, and then it would have connected to the Turnpike at a new exit 9. So again, that's not here anymore, but there is right-of-way remaining in Litchfield, and that is something that I think we really do want to give some thought to. What should be the disposition of that land? What should happen to it? So I was going to bring that up a little bit later. Another document that I put up because I thought it was relevant was this map, and this came out of, this is actually from the 1991, I think it was, master plan. It was referenced, concepts that are on here were referenced in the 2002 master plan. And we also kind of touched on some of these before. So it's a little bit of a confusing map. But first, what you can see is if you follow the line of Albuquerque, at the time that this was done, the northern connection for Albuquerque to 3A was not complete yet. So that shows in a dashed line. And then you go all the way down to the bottom. You see where Albuquerque intersects Page Road, and then you follow that dashed line. And this was the intent was to loop that Albuquerque easterly and connect with 3A. Right above where you can see is the proposed circumferential highway. So that was a long time kind of standing plan for Albuquerque. Kind of what the sentiment is on that now, I'm not quite as sure. Interestingly, it actually showed it crossing 3A and creating a parallel road in the commercial district, and then coming back and looping to Page Road. I thought that was conceptually interesting. I could see the logic to it. The idea was that would function as a service road for that southern commercial district, so that you wouldn't be fronting directly on 3A. Nevertheless, I throw that out there, not suggesting that we necessarily do it, although I think the concept of the loop, of completing the Albuquerque loop to 3A, is something that we might want to think about. At this time, there was no proposed connection to 102, but that's something that because of course that would have had to go right through the circumferential highway, but that's something that, we did talk about last time and we can talk about again. So I just thought it had some value. I throw it out there. There was actually also another map that I had meant to bring and I forgot, that showed a loop trail system that was also contemplated previously. Basically, the Albuquerque multi-use path was one side of it, and then there was another parallel one that kind of ran up 3A, making a giant loop, for what that's worth. So again, I just thought these might be of interest. I was actually doing a little poking around and found there were a number of different plans that were done over time on transportation, which is kind of interesting. And some of them are really detailed. Some of the things have happened. Most of them have not surprisingly. And a number of them were because of the impact of circumferential. Not surprisingly, the traffic counts that were projected once circumferential highway came in on 3A were more than double what we experience today in that area. And again, that's not surprising. You had a major highway connection all of a sudden. So anyway, kind of leaving that and then jumping to the transportation chapter. There's still a lot of editing work that needs to happen on this. A lot of this information, I'm happy to stop anywhere, but a lot of the information I think in here we've already talked about. We can come back to it, but I wanted to flag kind of jumping to page 11. That's the warrant analysis. And this was really, we discussed this at some length last time based on the memo. And essentially, just as a reminder, we did a warrant analysis of the potential for a signal at Page Road and 102. And the outcome of that was, because there was some concern expressed over that intersection backing up. And what we found was, indeed, that's true. It does back up. And it does trip some of the warrants, but not all of them. So at this point, it doesn't justify putting in another signal. That's certainly something, though, that we might want to continue to monitor, because that could change as traffic volumes increase. Another alternative might be to create another outlet, which is also what we talked about, and I'll come to that a little bit later. Nevertheless, as you can see, I put the whole warrant analysis in here, as part of the master plan, since that is an analysis that we did. Kind of moving on 17, we've already gone through the road surface, the RSMS, so I didn't think there was a lot of a reason to go back through that. We've talked a lot about the changes that happened in commuting patterns, which I think are a particularly interesting outcome. Although there's not a whole lot that we would necessarily do with it. Moving to page 22, there are a couple of themes that came up. It's going to come up again, but just one of the things I did flag here is we talked about, when we were talking about traffic calming, the impact of design speed versus actual speed. And just one of the things I wanted to flag is that in our subdivision regulations, we require highway-wide lanes on residential subdivision streets. So right now our standard is 12 feet, and that is federal highway standard for a interstate. That's just something for us to think about. That's really too wide. And when you create streets that wide, you encourage speed. So I did flag it here. And again, it's something that we want to look at and think about, but I've suggested that we consider going to 10-foot, or possibly, if we can't get away with 10 feet, 11-foot lanes. I think 10-foot, it would be reasonable for a residential street. So I just flagged that there. That was on page 22, but also because it's a theme that comes up. Going on to page 24, and again, open to adding, removing, taking out.
Well, I like that the reducing of, like, it'd be reducing pavement,
Right.
and nobody's afraid to park on like the edge of people's lawn. Like, we're not an area where people are afraid to drive on grass or something. So,
Right.
So I like the idea of that, of keeping it as little amount of pavement and keeping everything driving slower too. At the same time, it's like win-win. So thank you for flagging
Sure.
that. It's not something that I
And
think
it's
we would
also-
have known.
It's also less to maintain ultimately
Mhm.
for the town. So kind of moving to page 24, we had looked at a series of handouts on alternative traffic calming measures. I didn't feel that we really kind of came to a conclusion about whether we really wanted to see any of these particularly implemented. That's something we could think about. So what I did here was I just put in a discussion on them, and then I included some of the different examples, but didn't, I said these are things that we may want to consider, but not necessarily that we should look at one versus the other.
Oh, there was one. I was driving in Nashua, so I couldn't get a picture of it because I was driving. But we were. It's on your way to coming from Main Street on your way to Riv, and it's got I think it was bike lanes on either side, and then it had the stamped. Maybe it didn't have bike lanes, but it had stamped, instead of like a regular double yellow line, it had maybe a 2 or 3 foot wide space with just stamped pavement in the middle of it. So not anything extra to take care of, but it did the whole traffic calming thing that it made the road feel tighter than it actually was. It was,
Or Main
if
Street.
you're going towards, I believe it's Main Street towards, the circle where like the Haywards and everything is. Before you get to the circle, I can probably pull it up on Google Maps. It's got that the pavement is stamped just in between, and the double yellow line is just widened so that it makes the whole road feel smaller, and it slows you down before you get to that traffic circle. But that might be a good image to put in here.
I'll go and take a picture.
I can pull it up on the street view probably.
It's much nicer to get a local example of something. So yeah.
I think it would fit really well into that section.
I do, and they did put in one on Manchester Street in Nashua. There's a hill where people were speeding down before you get, if you know the store Janot's, and now there's a raised crosswalk there.
Okay.
Which is.
I don't know that area, but.
I don't think people have enough warning that it's coming, but once you
once you get there,
once you make that mistake once, So for now, I put these in, and again, it's something that we might want to think about. And I do talk later about the possibility, because one of the ones that we spent some time on was talking about Albuquerque and the possibility of widening the shoulder and making it a designated bike lane, especially if you paint it green. So on page 26, that's where a couple of those images are of what that looks like. The context is a little bit more urban, but basically, that's what you get when you get a green bike lane. And the idea there was accommodating the bicyclists, because as we've discussed a lot, in fact, I saw it on my way here today, some more serious bikers are tending not to go on the multi-use path, but they're just riding along the edge of the road itself, which is probably prudent. And then that got me to page 29, although I'm happy to stop anywhere, where again, we kind of talk about the multi-use path and the amount of usage that it's really getting. One of the things I flagged here kind of towards the end of it, and I think that was flagged in a couple of places, is the lack of crosswalks across Albuquerque. So right now, the only crosswalk we have is at Hillcrest. And that's where the path shifts from the westerly side to the easterly side. So there's a logic. But that's something else that we really might want to think about, at least at some key intersections like Pinecrest, is putting in a designated crosswalk. The critical thing with that is it really accomplishes two things. One, for a motorist on Albuquerque, it's a visual cue. Oh, they're pedestrians. This is a crosswalk. I should slow down. I should watch out. And so it can be a traffic calming measure in itself, even just painted, not necessarily stamped. But also, when you put in a legal crosswalk, motorists are legally obligated to stop for somebody crossing. So it gives the right for somebody to cross. But places like Pinecrest, I think, are particularly important. But everywhere on Albuquerque, the multi-use path is always on one side of the road or the other. So if you're on the other side, you've always got to cross to get to it. or to get back, to your destination or home. So just something to think about, at least in the key intersections, is putting them in. If they're just painted, that's a pretty cheap intervention. So I put it in there, but otherwise realistically, and I think it is something to talk about. We're seeing bicycle and pedestrian improvements that are being, they're put in a lot of places. More and more, you're seeing a push to put them in. That said, realistically, when you look at the percentage of residents in Litchfield who are biking or walking to work, it's extremely small. And for the foreseeable future, it's really always going to be. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodations are great. For the most part, though, when we look at the multi-use path, it is recreational. It's an amenity, and it's nice to see. And there are some people who can use it to walk or bike to work or to school. But for the most part, that is what it is. And so that's what we kind of want to think about and balance as we look to make recommendations. I wouldn't necessarily make recommendations that we put sidewalks and paths everywhere, because that might not be, with limited resources, that might not be the best use of funds. So I think we want to think strategically. The only place I put it, and I know we talked about the possibility of more, but the one area where I know for sure we talked about was completing the sidewalks on Pinecrest so that they can continue all the way to Albuquerque. And that really would be advantageous, because now you're linking two schools to the multi-use path, to the parks, and there are also a number of neighborhoods coming off of Pinecrest. So whether we think there's other areas that warrant that also, but that's an area where we've already made an investment. So it'd be a matter of completing it. So
on that subject though,
yeah.
I just noticed it this week, and somebody had mentioned it to me the week before. Our high school off of Albuquerque, the kids walk. If you live like within a mile of that, there's no busing. They walk. And I was coming up Albuquerque, and school had just gotten out, and she was trying to get across the street, and there was nothing to help.
Yeah, you're right.
So that might be one of the colored ones you're talking about here.
That's actually a really good point. Maybe even
right
one
in front of
that's
this
right in front of the high school.
because there's no crosswalk in front of the high
Albuquerque to
school.
the other side of the homes.
That's right. That's a very good point. That would be one that you'd probably want to highlight.
For the
More.
safety of the kids.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's in year round. I mean, in the winter and everything.
Yeah.
They're walking a mile. I think it was a mile radius. So maybe
That's a very good point. In fact, we should
Around and look
probably
around.
plot that radius on a map.
and maybe
Oh, yeah,
maybe it's
crosswalks just
fine,
leave it
but
in.
I just haven't walked around there enough to.
No,
Maybe I'll take a trip when school's getting out, just to
Right.
see what's going on.
And I know they walk to the park too.
Look at it, I had no
That's a good
idea.
thought.
My son's only in third grade. He's only not dealing with the high school yet. When I found out they don't even bus the kids in the winter. Okay.
Well, good for you.
Good for them. They're getting stronger. But again, the
I-
safety issue as we're talking about with these
It's a
crosswalks.
safety
I see
issue,
this
you're
poor
right.
girl trying to get across Albuquerque.
Do there need to be crosswalks? Are there crosswalks?
I don't know if there's any.
between
I want to look at the
paths?
parking lots to see where the parking. I just want to see.
Yeah.
I have to take a visual. I don't know
The
yet.
only ones at Hillcrest, there are none down there.
So even continuing the path across the side street?
There's a
I can't
sidewalk
remember
up
if there is.
near this high
It
school.
goes past,
It's on the high school
path
side,
continues
but they
past
were
the
trying
high
to get to
school.
the houses on
But
the
like,
other
so when the
side.
path crosses a side street, does there need to be a crosswalk
There should
there?
be.
It's not a.
I know there's
Maybe.
at least a couple. I think there is one at Pinecrest. I can't remember if there's one down there, but there should be.
Okay, I
There
can't
should
remember either.
Because again, that's like letting the motorist know. The path
Yeah, the
continues.
pathway is there.
Right.
Okay.
And also allowing you to stop short
Mhm.
if you're stopping, so that they can go by.
Yeah.
'Cause otherwise
It might
they're-
be okay. I don't know. I just want to go
No, it's a
take a
good-
look.
No, it's a
I
it's a
think
If
very
we're
good
talking
point.
about painted crosswalks.
Yeah, we should put in, I think.
I think Joan wanted to say something. Did you want to say something, Joan?
No.
Oh, okay. That is not you.
Fortunately,
Again, we may not have an issue, but
Right.
just to look at it.
anytime the solution is paint, it's usual. That's a pretty low impact, low cost solution. So, but it is, yeah, it's worth taking a look at. And I will plot that radius just to kind of see what are some of the other key areas that we might want to think about.
Maybe she was jaywalking. And again, I wasn't tuned in. I was just go, let her go, kind of thing.
Which was nice.
It was nice, but again, I don't, maybe they do have them. I don't know. I wasn't clued into that until
Yeah,
recently.
they don't have them. I know they don't across Albuquerque because I noticed that the other day.
Well, they've been safe so far. Not that I
Right.
You want to keep them safe. I haven't heard of any problem.
Right, but and that's definitely something that we might want to talk about. I'm not aware though of any other areas where we've got sidewalks. What am I missing? Are there any other places in town that we have?
No, there aren't. I don't think so.
I
The
don't think so.
Pinecrest one would be really
I think that's the only one.
good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people walk on Pinecrest.
Right.
Some people are further down Hillcrest too, now Rookery Way and Bear Run.
Well, a lot of people walk from the senior homes out on Pinecrest
Yeah.
to get to I always thought when we built that, we should have put a connection there to Albuquerque Path.
That makes sense.
It came up to the voters ones, right? I think, was that Rookery Way and Bear Run, Hillcrest? Because there's nothing, you're trying to, we did a town cleanup and you were taking your life in your hands trying to clean up the trash on the side. It could be a bet, the other one that you two are mentioning a priority, I think, but maybe just get it on the list. I
Especially
think it
that
was turned down. by the voters, actually.
Pinecrest and Albuquerque, because people rarely stop there. It's very dangerous, that intersection. And so a crosswalk would give them notice to pause,
Right.
hopefully.
So were you suggesting sidewalk on?
I think Hillcrest, further down on
said
Hillcrest, right? Now near Bear Run and
I think
Rookery.
you couldn't
It's when you
widen
enter
it or
town the
something.
other direction. I always call it the Beaver Pond.
Hillcrest is a state road. don't we?
Hillcrest is a state road.
Oh, I
That's right.
I didn't know that. I thought 3A
We
was the
do.
only one.
I think we do winter maintenance. I can't remember. I can never remember if it's winter or summer maintenance, but it's a state road.
That's right.
So if we leave the town hall and let the pink houses over here, we take a right, you're going out of town that way. It just no sidewalks. And I see
That's
people
the
trying to
state
walk, there's a family's houses there and they're trying to walk kids and pets on that road.
It's narrow, but the trees going in.
Yeah. In that case, we'd have to talk to the state.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's not
We're
worth
thinking
doing.
of them.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that that's not
'Cause
something that
there's
we should think about.
Pathways into the conservation area back through those neighborhoods, Tamarack and those neighborhoods.
is?
You can get the conservation area that's right where we oriented, right out there. It goes back all the way back through there, and there's paths like in between people's houses in some of those neighborhoods on the other side of Hillcrest that you can
Well,
get into
yeah, the
there.
state forest, I mean, into the state
Yeah,
forest.
yeah. And so it would be nice, to have being able to walk from those
So then you can
neighborhoods,
get into the conservation
get into
area.
the conservation area. But I figured
Because
that's
you're not going to do that with a stroller. I've seen these poor families trying to do that.
just. Yeah,
But there is a lot of
shouldn't be walking
wetlands on
that
both
road.
sides, honest, I don't know if you could do it.
Right.
Yeah, maybe you
Hmm.
could. I guess it can't hurt to mention it if it's.
Can't hurt to
Yeah,
mention it and then
plan,
to maybe
yeah.
look at some alternatives because maybe there's another option. Not looking at the wetlands, not looking at the land ownership, but maybe there's another way that we can make a connection if we can't do a sidewalk. But yeah, I think it's
Oh,
worth.
okay.
I
It's
think
not
it's
that
worth
far from
phrasing
the
as an
town
issue,
hall.
and it's worth looking at, and that's something that we could
Is
explore.
it like a half a mile from here?
Yeah, because you see the parking
It's not that
areas
far
and
from here.
stuff
They
will
might
be
wanna walk to the
full
town
by
hall.
the state forest there.
What's the other
Does
school?
anybody else have
That's
any,
McKinley.
you guys have anything you want to add?
What is it?
Do they have sidewalks up to that?
If we're done going through this, I just got a couple questions.
Yes.
Yes.
They do, okay.
On McElwain.
Just so you know, the master plan, it's the plan that's basically a future vision of the town, and we continue to update the chapters. We have transportation chapter, we have a community design chapter, we have different chapters in the plan. We work on them in increments, but basically what we try to do is we try to update it as we go along. So right now we're working on transportation. This document is not anything regulatory. It's strictly advisory. And it's basically something that gets kept in sort of the archives of the town. And, you can reach in and look at it and see, what did the planning board do back in 2019 when they were looking at this. So it's kind of a sort of a reference point for stuff that may come up. So just throw that out there.
And you've gone in front of the board with some of these ideas too.
What's that?
You try to get buy-in from the board also.
Right,
Sometimes
exactly.
they'll go to the board of selectmen.
Right.
So
I bet it's also how things like Albuquerque got built, because that was a policy of the town. It was embedded in the master plan. And then as developers came along and proposed development, they built sections of Albuquerque and or left right away. So it can be used in that way as well. And one of the values too is that where we have recommendations, like say a recommendation to complete the sidewalk from Pinecrest, that could be something that gets proposed to the town as part of a warrant article, and the master plan can form a basis. But it's also something that we could pursue grant funding for. We've got, which I was going to mention a little later, but I might as well mention it now. But we've got, right now, there's a round of funding for what they call CMAQ grants, which are congestion mitigation and air quality grants. So those are grants that fund improvements that are supposed to reduce congestion. And those come out roughly every 2 years, not necessarily. And they do fund things like, non-motorized improvements if you can show that it'll reduce congestion. Last year, we had TAP funds coming out, and those are transportation alternative funds. And those do fund things like sidewalks and multi-use paths and bike lanes. Litchfield didn't propose, anything last year for those. But if, this is a plan or a policy, the next time those funds come around, it would be a good opportunity to pursue them.
Now, do you have to be shovel ready for those, or can you use that money for engineering to
You
plan?
can. You don't need to be shovel ready. But what you do want to be able to do is articulate why you need it, what the benefits are, and then to be able to say that it is a recommendation in your master plan that adds strength. And having gone through the process of talking through the rationale, it becomes a whole lot easier when you're ready to apply for funding for something like that, to pull it and to reference it. So there's a real value in that.
interesting.
And the public is invited and they have input into these chapters as well.
But this, basically, these chapters, it's nothing that gets voted on at town meeting or anything. It's part of our, sort of our administrative process.
Right.
And,
Well, it's mandated by the state also
Well-
to have to update it every 5
Well,
years.
yeah.
right, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is it's not something that it gets voted on.
Right.
But we approve it.
Right.
So basically, you're saying this could also be used as a tool to get funding
Yes.
and to put the justification and all that and demonstrate why it would be effective and why we need it.
Yes. And for a development guide also, so as if we had, I don't think that's possible, but if we had, say, a subdivision proposed on Pinecrest and we have a recommendation that there'll be a sidewalk, then we can also say to the developer putting it in, master plan calls for a sidewalk in this area, and that's the rationale for the planning board to say we want to see that built as part of the project. So that's another way.
Right.
So far we've got, I think it's complete the sidewalk on Pinecrest, look at the possibility on Hillcrest of putting in a sidewalk or pedestrian accommodations, and we've talked about putting in the crosswalks. And I'm feeling like that's,
At the high school.
yes, and possibly Pinecrest, some of the other locations. So, and I'm feeling like that's sounding like that's it. I don't think we're calling for sidewalks or bike paths or other improvements elsewhere.
Well, what were you saying, Joan? There's a place, there's a community that walks like on Pinecrest, was
Oh,
it?
there's a over 55 community out on Pinecrest, and they walk from their housing down to the Albuquerque bike path.
And there's no
There's
sidewalk
no sidewalk on Pinecrest.
that
That's
way.
right.
So that's included in that
Yeah,
section,
that's
right?
part of
Okay.
the stretch that we would
Okay.
complete.
The sidewalk on Pinecrest picks up at, I think, before McElwain. Yeah,
Yes.
first, the next street up.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name is,
Yeah,
but
I can't either. I live there.
yeah.
And then it goes down McElwain, but it would be nice to
Yeah.
finish that whole.
And then it actually
Okay.
loops up around. It's the only section of sidewalk on 3A. It goes up,
Right.
to the elementary school.
It goes down the
I
hill on
didn't realize that
Pinecrest and to the elementary
Connected that
school.
whole way.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think I like that idea of connecting for the schools. I
Yeah.
think that's,
Yeah.
that's something definitely.
You're talking about the sidewalk that we do the Memorial Day parade. We walk from LMS down
Right.
and I'm just not clear on what we're talking about.
There is a sidewalk there from LMS down the hill.
Yeah.
When you go out east the other way on Pinecrest, it stopped about a block up and then there's no sidewalk.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Down to Albuquerque, there's no sidewalk.
You can
Right.
definitely see that people walk there.
Oh,
So that's just the idea, just on, on that side, complete it, take it to
Yeah.
the rest of the distance. And that really would make
Sounds
sense.
And also Hillcrest? Is that what we were talking about? Some kind of,
If you leave our driveway here,
Yeah.
the town hall, and take a right, go down like a half a mile, you have Bear Run and
Yeah.
Rookery Road. There's no sidewalk there.
okay.
And I see a lot of people with strollers and, because there's a
Oh.
lot of houses in that area and it's a turned road, turned. And when we were cleaning up the trash day, it was, these trucks are just coming at you. And there's not a lot of room on the side to move. And it may not be a fix for it, but it's just,
And also
something to
hearing that
mention.
there's access to trails back there that
yeah.
kind of
I didn't know.
adds strength to it. And obviously it connects to town hall complex. too.
Then it would get here and then they could get to Albuquerque, they could go every direction.
Well,
They could come
but
up
the
this
state probably, they'd be
Right.
happy for you to build it, but,
way. Right. I forgot it was a state road, yeah.
you'd have to work through them.
Yeah, you do. And there are some challenges with that.
Yeah.
With the state. You also have to agree to maintenance. It's not insurmountable, but when you bring in the state, it does become a different thing. So, all right, that's what I'm going to focus on. I will look at that radius also, though, around the high school, just to kind of see what the impact of that is and whether or not there's some other things that we might want to consider because of that. There might not be, but maybe there will be.
Did we talk about the electric cars in here? I'm doing search for, do we wanted to put any electric charge stations at the town hall or not? Did
So,
we propose that?
do
I think we talked about
We
it.
did
Yeah.
talk about it. Do we want to put in a recommendation or is that something we should pursue or consider pursuing?
What was that statistic you said about GM?
Oh, yeah, GM's supposed to be, no more gas vehicles in like
Right.
less than 5 years or something.
Oh, wow.
That's,
It's real soon.
Maybe just at the town hall. I don't know, just to plug in the car.
that's actually something to really think about. Well, also the schools, especially for the benefit of teachers who would be parked there for long periods of time. So that is something to think about for the town hall complex and the schools. I will add something on that. We've also got the VW settlement money coming forward. That's not the only reason to do something like that, but potential to access some grant funds, that's a good thing. So yes, I will add
Just
that.
we're thinking of the future, right?
Yeah, no, that's,
Well, no, yeah.
that's really important. Well, I mean, to that end, I did not include, I could include, I probably should include some conversation around autonomous vehicles. I didn't put it in there because there isn't really anything actionable other than we know it's looming out there. We don't know when and we don't know what it'll mean. So I could put in a section that just kind of says that talks about the technology. It's not going to have a recommendation associated with it because I just don't know what that would be, but I could add that if you think it makes sense.
Just
while we're on
awareness, it's
that.
coming. That 5G stuff that we're going to talk about later, it's for the cars. What's one of the reasons for it?
That's true.
So it's-
Okay.
But I didn't know if that had worked into your 10-foot road. I was thinking that when you said you want to make the roads a little smaller.
Well, now they're saying that one of the impacts with autonomous vehicles will be you can even make them smaller.
Okay, so that's the 10-foot road's fine and the,
Right. Because you won't have human error. So you can pack them in. And they all will be smart enough. They'll supposedly all be smart enough to know exactly where every other vehicle is.
Well, that's what that's
And
talking.
I will give you a heads up, the
That's
fire
supposed to
department is probably not gonna like this idea. of
I
smaller.
think that doesn't surprise me.
There you go, yeah,
It doesn't
really.
surprise me.
What about the
Get
water?
snow.
Some of the roads have the water pipes under them.
Yeah,
Is there,
Driveways.
is there a limit on the width of those? I'd have to look at the rigs. I don't remember.
they have the pipes under the driveways, but not so much on the roads.
So we have like gullies and they, when they're testing the
open
water, it goes
drainage,
down the
yeah.
gully. I just don't know if there's a street limit size on that.
All
I
our
didn't
streets
see.
are
I'd have
pretty
to
much
look it up.
24.
Hmm?
All of our streets are pretty much 24, except the first couple of over 55, we made them smaller, and then the fire department didn't like it, so
Hmm.
they're bigger.
Yeah, that's often an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue, but yep, okay. Nice.
And so then kind of moving on 32, I put a really weak recommendation on paratransit. It was something that we talked about very briefly. What paratransit is. So paratransit is subsidized transportation provided to low-income seniors. It's in areas like cities like Nashville that have fixed route transportation. They're required by federal law to do it. I think it's a half mile or a 3/4 mile of a fixed route. In the Hudson and in Merrimack, they contract with Nashville to provide that service. So basically, it's a subsidized service, and they will send out a paratransit vehicle. I don't want to say it's on demand because it isn't. You have to pre-arrange for it. You have to arrange in advance, and then for like a limited fee, they come and they pick you up and they take you, to your destination. So in the past, it's been kind of put in there in the master plans as Litchfield should consider contracting with Nashua for paratransit services. So I didn't put a firm recommendation in here, and part of the reason I didn't, although this is something that we could certainly do, it's just the percentage of low-income seniors in Litchfield is extremely low. It's less than 2%. And with the advent of ride hailing, how much of a need it is, I don't know. So I don't want to say it is or it isn't. So there's some conversation around here, but I fell short of saying, that's a recommendation that we should make. I just don't know whether there's really sufficient demand in Litchfield for that type of service. I could be wrong. There might be. The statistic that jumped out at me is when you look at the percentage of Litchfield seniors living below the poverty level, it's 1.3%. So it's a very small number of people.
Why are you going on that percentage though? Is that to get this service?
The primary driver of the service is low income.
Okay, because maybe there's a lot that might want a certain bus designated.
I doubt it because of the income level of the seniors that move here, and they know that there's not transportation here when they move here.
But as they age, maybe, I don't know.
I mean, if
You know,
there
how many do
if
we
there
have?
is a desire for it,
Yeah.
for a
They might
subsidized
find
service.
a for-profit one to do it if they're paying for the service.
Well, that's
They don't
kind of
have
why I
to go
said,
around and want the service.
with ride hailing, I think if you can afford an on-demand service, you would opt for that before you would opt for a paratransit service,
So
which is much more
paratransit
limited.
means a certain definition.
But if you can't afford, to pay for Uber or Lyft, paratransit services are hugely beneficial because they're deeply subsidized. They don't have the convenience, of a ride-hailing service. But if there is indeed a demand out there, then maybe that is something that we should think about. So I put it in here. I didn't make a strong recommendation.
So I'm looking at their last sentence here. With the advent of ride-hailing services such as Uber and Lyft, demand might be limited.
Yes,
So that's just based on convenience, not affordability.
that's right.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanted to clear that up.
I put it
I don't
in.
use Uber that much, so I don't know. I have no
Right,
idea.
right. Most of us don't, not in this area.
Yeah.
But if you do need a ride,
Yep.
I did it the other day for when my car was being repaired.
Yep.
It was pretty easy. So I did put in a conversation in here around passenger rail, and we've talked about it in the past. We didn't talk about it a lot in the context here. So the reason I put it in here was really for two reasons. Well, for three reasons. One, we could see that the Capital Corridor Initiative gets new life. If in fact the $5 million that's proposed right now, I think it goes up for a vote in the House this week. That's Senate Bill 241. That would allocate about $5 million to do the engineering feasibility analysis, including looking at the cost and looking at potential ways it could be paid for, et cetera. For the Capital Corridor project. So the Capital Corridor project would be an extension of MBTA commuter rail service from Lowell to Nashua and to Manchester. As it was proposed, who knows if that would change in the process, but the way as the Capital Corridor was proposed, there would be a stop in South Nashua, a stop in downtown Nashua, a stop in Bedford in the vicinity of 101 to connect to the airport, and a stop in downtown Manchester. What's being proposed for funding is basically continuing the analysis, doing that kind of final phase of the analysis, at which point the state could decide, yes, let's move on, or no, this won't work. It's not feasible. It's too expensive, whatever the conclusion may be. Nevertheless, it seems to be getting at least potentially a little more life. So I did put it in here. But the other two reasons why I put it in here is one of the things that we noted before under travel patterns is the percentage of Litchfield residents, or I should say, the percentage of Litchfield residents in the workforce that are commuting to Massachusetts has increased pretty dramatically. And one of the other things that really jumped out, at least to me when I was looking at travel patterns, was the impact that the airport access road had on Litchfield, on the commuting patterns in Litchfield. And, to me, they were pretty striking, and the impact that it had on traffic. And kind of what jumped out at me is if it should so happen that the Capital Corridor project moves forward and there is a commuter rail station at 101, that's a station that is pretty accessible to Litchfield, pretty obviously. And that could have a significant impact on Litchfield. That just as the airport access road changed the relative location of Litchfield for commuters, that would too. So it's definitely something I think we want to keep on our radar. Again, no recommendation associated with it, but it's something out there that could have an impact. So worth knowing. So under recommendations and conclusions, and this is not really a fleshed out section, this is almost really some bullets that I put in. So one of the things that we talked about was extension of Albuquerque to 102. I threw in here, and I don't know if we want this thrown in here, is looking at the potential of also extending it to 3A. And the reason I did that was, one, it was something that was on the books for a while. I'm not quite sure what happened to it. But realizing that there's right-of-way there that could potentially be accessed to make that happen, that was one that made it jump out. But the other is the potential to actually access developable land that's commercial industrially zoned. And that's kind of interesting when you think about it, because if you, I was going to say, look at a zoning map. At least I've got a zoning map here. I'm sorry, everybody cannot see this. But this red area here is zoned highway commercial, and that's in fact the circumferential, that's largely the circumferential right of way. So that's at this point surplus property. And roughly the extension of Albuquerque to 3A kind of came down through Cutler, took a turn, and really kind of followed that line to intersect here. So if that were to actually be developed and come through, part of the intention was it would open up the interior of this land for commercial industrial development. So it's something to think about. There could be a value in doing that, whether it's done the same way the rest of Albuquerque was, incrementally, as the land is developed. The value of having it kind of established as a policy is people know as they're incrementally building it that the aim is to take it all the way through. It's also something potentially that one could see grant funds for if it's well enough articulate. And the justification is, so I threw it in there. I think it's something that I want to think about. Connecting to 102 has a couple of advantages. The biggest of being is that if we connect Albuquerque to 102, it would serve to pull some traffic away from the intersection of Page Road and 102. So that would reduce the impact to Page. But the other thing that connecting Albuquerque through to 3A would do is it would pull all that through traffic off of Page Road. And connecting to 102 would pull a lot of traffic off the remaining section of Page Road. Page Road would really become largely a rural residential road. It would not be bearing through traffic to a significant extent. The through traffic would be pulled now onto Albuquerque, which is exactly what happened to 3A when Albuquerque was completed. So just, I think it's, we don't have to make a decision now, but I think it's something really worth thinking about and from a development point of view, but from a traffic point of view also.
Tax base too.
And for the tax base,
commercial
absolutely.
business.
I have a question. In the past, surplus DOT property, the first ones to get a bid on it was New Hampshire Housing. Is that still the case?
I don't know. I didn't think it was just New Hampshire Housing. I thought there was a process and I thought the town was involved, but I have to check on that. That's something that we should look into. So I'll look into what the process is. I will say I know that Hudson is working with DOT precisely on building a town road in the old circumferential right of way. That's what they're calling the Hudson Boulevard. So that's their plan. Is so far, the DOT has been willing to work with Hudson on that. So I would think the same thing would be true here, but that's something that we should look at. So I'll look at what happens with the disposition of the land. The other potentially complicating factor is whether or not the DOT used federal dollars to acquire the right of way. So that is potentially an issue. I'll look into that a little more too, but that's potentially an issue because I'm almost certain that they did. So in other words, the federal government could be looking for a payback.
Yeah.
At some point, though, having the land just kind of locked in limbo isn't good for anybody. So
Right.
I'll dive into that piece of it a little bit further, but it's probably worth at least a bit more of a dig. Otherwise, I put in here looking at the traffic calming measures on Albuquerque as we discussed. Also considering prohibition on through traffic on Albuquerque north of Hillcrest. We had talked about that last time, although we didn't talk about that tonight. And then adding crosswalks at some key intersections, which we did talk about, extending the sidewalk on Pinecrest, which we talked about. And this was not something we talked about recently, but previously, well, as an outcome of that RSMS road condition survey, a recommendation that the town develop a multi-year maintenance plan to basically keep everything in a good state of repair as it is now. And then we didn't really talk about this time, last time either, but just to continue to implement the access management controls that Litchfield already implements on 3A and 102 to limit curb cuts. And that's the main way that we do that now is by controlling frontage and site distance requirements for commercial development, especially heavy traffic ones like gas stations, et cetera, where we have that 400 feet, requirement. So that's just a recommendation. We continue to do that. That's it.
Okay.
We missing anything?
It all matches our community design chapter. It's all in sync with our community design chapter.
Actually, it is. So my goal will be to, I'm going to look into a couple of these issues, such as the right of way, and plot that 1 mile radius. We'll look at maybe if there's some options for Hillcrest, and then I'm going to make some changes and do some additional stuff, and then I'll put up a draft that is worthy of reading through in more detail and editing. That makes sense.
That piece of yellow land behind you on the 102 side, is that kind of the area like above that? Yeah, where your finger is now.
Here?
Yeah, go up a little bit to the big yellow piece, not the J, to the left of the J. Keep going left. Oh, your left, the other way, right? That one. That's roughly the area we're talking about, right?
So this here, yes.
Because it's a huge area, the board definitely has to be.
Well,
whatever we come up with, you definitely
whatever we
have
come
to
up
go
with,
in.
right? But it's a huge area,
Big
and
piece
then
of land of
and then
which-
really this is not inconsequential either.
Oh, no,
I mean that's
no.
mostly right away. That's all zone highway commercial, but it is a big piece of land, and really the alternative to putting in a through road of some sort or a parallel road is it's going to be deep driveways all off of 3A. Is the other way to develop it.
But they might have other ideas too, or
They
or
absolutely
they have a
may
40-year
other
marching
ideas.
plan with the highway, that one that's not going to happen. So anyway, this is just, whatever it is, that's a big piece of land, plus
Big
it has
piece
a
of
lot
land.
of potential, so
one owner
whatever's
also.
recommended here definitely has to go to them. Keep them on the same page.
I can have.
It's not like we're in a vacuum here.
So I live on Circle Drive. I don't know if you know where that is.
Way down there, the left.
It was surrounded by all the pink stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I had a guy from the state come out and give me a permit to take some trees down. And when I moved in, I was told it was all state land. He goes, the state's trying to get rid of this land. They're trying to see if there's any other state, because I think it's the DOT owns it or something.
Yeah.
They're trying to see if there's any other state agencies that want it. But if they don't, you should buy it. And I haven't followed up with him. I don't know if he knew what he was talking about, but he was saying that the state was trying to dump that land right there, and that's all part of the same.
That's very interesting.
How long ago was that?
2015 maybe.
Yeah, because there would have been an interchange here.
Yeah. And
Huh. I don't remember the exact process, so I'll refresh my memory on it. I thought that the municipality certainly gets notice, if not
Yeah.
dibs, as part of the process. But we should definitely figure that one out. That's going to have that could have a significant impact.
Mm.
So, all right, I'll take a
Kind of
look at that.
regional, a little bit of regional.
Well, yeah, regional.
Regional. So we go Hudson, Litchfield.
It certainly affects, yeah, it certainly affects
Oh,
Hudson.
102. The traffic's going to be going that way.
Right.
and the outlet from Albuquerque to 102 is this dotted line I see that's a little bit south of Page Road. Is that what we're kind of talking about here? I don't know, this map you had given me.
Oh, that one didn't contemplate a connection to 102. It just went to 3A. If we were to connect to 102, it would be somewhere this way. Most likely the connection would be in Hudson. I suppose you could loop around this way. I'd have to look more closely at land ownership and wetlands and see where is the best way to draw that.
So even south of Cutler.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that would really pull off is anybody really, mainly folks who are going this way.
Right.
Although you might pull up some others as well if it's a whole lot nicer and more convenient than going that way. That section of Page Road is a little bit, it's pretty thickly developed.
Yeah.
It's not great as a through road. Really, none of Page Road is great as a through road.
Right.
Taking a left turn onto 102, that's really
That's the problem.
that's the problem too.
And it absolutely backs up.
Yeah. My wife refuses to to take a left turn there. She'll go around Cutler, try to take it there.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any kind of traffic, I don't like trying to take a left turn.
No.
No. Take a right turn and then turn around.
And then, yeah.
Take a left turn, go down the breakdown lane, because you got something off and
Right.
build up speed.
All right, so that's what I got for master plan.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jay, for that. And we'll definitely take, look forward to rewrites and obviously working, continuing on with the transportation chapter.
Yes.
So the next item, proposed zoning and site plan changes.
So a few, I was hoping to have a few more, but a couple I was able to put together. So first of all, the easiest one to dispense with is sheds. This was Kevin Lynch's suggestion that we go to the 200 square feet from 192. Well, golly, I mean, that's just logical. Paper copy. if
Was that
anybody
about a
wants
setback
one.
issue? I'm trying to remember. Was that the
Yeah,
setback?
your shed can be set back a minimum of only 10 feet if it's 192 square feet or less. Otherwise, it's got to meet the traditional setbacks. So the idea is just a small shed is not as intrusive, so you can have it closer to the rear or side property line. I mean, it was a simple suggestion. It's a whole lot easier to measure 200 square feet than 192. It's simple. It's not substantive. So that's easy to
So
put
they sold them
together.
that way anyway, right? They're sold
Yeah.
at 200.
I'm sure they're all over the place at 200. So, I mean, it's an easy fix, and wording it was super easy.
So is this just letting them not have to be 10 feet? It's just giving them a little bit
No,
of
they
room?
have to be a minimum of 10
Okay,
feet.
so we're just
But
saying.
they
round
don't
it up.
have to meet the larger side and rear setbacks
Okay,
that a bigger shed would.
okay.
But it's just saying go from 192 to 200 because that just makes a lot more sense for everybody. So that's simple. So you can see the wording here. I think that was very, very easy to do. That was the only one I worded so far. The next one I thought I'd jump to is electronic signs. I do have another paper copy. So this, to the question of how do zoning amendment issues come up, this came up within the context of somebody proposing an electronic sign and realizing that we don't define what that is in our ordinance. There is language in the ordinance that you could use, but we really don't have a definition around it. And so one, we probably should have a definition around it because it is a type of signage that's increasingly common. And then the question is, once we define it, do we want to allow it? Do we want to allow it under certain circumstances? Do we want to allow it everywhere or nowhere? And one of the things that jumps out is there are different types of electronic signs that are out there. There are ones that are merely time and temperature, and it's a uniform color. There are some that have a great deal of animation and motion going on in them. And there are some that change frequently, some less frequently. You've probably seen in some areas now the electronic billboards, where it's not necessarily a moving image, but the billboard itself is changing on some sort of regular basis. So they're just all things that are out there, kind of like what we're talking about with, transportation. Technology is changing. So I didn't come up with any concrete recommendations. What I did do, though, is look at some ordinances from other communities in the area to see how are they defining it and how are they regulating it. So the first one, and again, these are really just for us to look at and maybe digest, is Merrimack. And Merrimack is actually pretty simple. As you can see, they define 3 types of electronic sign. One which is basically what they call the electronic message display. And then there's the electronic changeable copy, and then electronic graphic display. Again, we don't have to go through these in a whole lot of detail. So I put the definition in there, and then there's a section in Merrimack sign ordinance of signs prohibited in all districts. And then as you can see, what I highlighted was basically they are prohibiting electronic signs in all districts where the message changes more often than once in a 20-minute period. So basically what that's saying is we're going to allow you to have an electronic sign because you are, whatever, that's the way you prefer it to display, but we're not going to allow it to change frequently. It's not going to be changing copy, scrolling copy. There's not going to be any animation. But if you prefer it, to solid letters that you put up, you can do that. You can change it infrequently. They do make an exception for time and temperature. So again, not saying that's what we should or should not do, but it was fairly straightforward. And then moving on to the next page, Nashua's ordinance. Nashua's ordinance is more elaborate and more in-depth, which is not surprising. They have more commercial districts. So they go into, they don't prohibit electronic signs in all districts. What they do is you can see applicability, and this is where they define what the signs are, and they use the term changing signs. And then you can see what they call electronic message center. And so they do allow them, but these are a host of different restrictions that they place on them. And essentially those continue on to the next page. So I pulled this together for informational reasons. I'm sure there's other examples out there, but I felt that these kind of covered the territory pretty well of the different types that are out there. And so you have an example basically of a community that's pretty much prohibiting them for the most part everywhere. And then another one that is allowing them under certain conditions. And then I'm sure, and I didn't go through the entire ordinance, I would imagine they're allowed in certain zones and not others, et cetera. But so I think the thing to look at is, are there pieces of these that we like, that we want to take, at least in terms of the definition? And then secondly, are there circumstances where we think we should allow them, or do we think they shouldn't be allowed anywhere? Kind of what's the thinking, what's the feeling? And again, we don't have to make a decision on that now, but it's probably something to think
The
about.
fire station and the police station should be able to put one up when they need to. That's to make that a priority, right?
I suspect that they can.
Didn't somebody say at our last meeting that the town hall wanted one, right? So they didn't have to go out there with the letters and keep changing.
Well, we like that, but.
So the town hall may want
They're
one.
kind of expensive, so we're probably.
Oh, they are.
Right.
Oh, I didn't even know about the price. I didn't even look at the price. Okay.
I mean, you have to think, well, who's gonna benefit or use these types of electronic signs? I mean, the thing that comes to mind, like places like probably like Mel's, probably maybe.
Well, I tell you, there's a church coming for a variance for one.
Okay, so yeah, I mean,
That was one of the things that prompted this.
I see. Okay,
Always is. So,
I wouldn't have expected a church, but
well, because there's different reasons why people want to use an electronic sign. Gas stations like them because the price of fuel changes regularly. So that is an electronic sign. It doesn't flash. It doesn't change constantly. To that not more than once every 20 minutes. In Merrimack, that allows a gas station to have an electronic sign because the price of gas isn't going to change that frequently. So it does allow, it's for a lot of businesses where the price on something changes or there is a message that they want to change with some frequency, but not every day. It sure beats getting up on a ladder and changing letters manually. Mm-hmm. So that's one kind of type of business and sign that would use one. Then there are those that want to have a scrolling message. That's changing very frequently. And so does that have a place or not? I could totally see a entertainment-oriented business wanting something animated,
Right.
because that would be really catchy and interesting or spooky or whatever you wanted it to be. That's a different, type of usage. Time and temperature, that's kind of benign. It's look at me.
Mhm.
But in public sector is exempt anyway, but, certainly you could see a church, a school, a club having a message that they want to change sometimes. Plant sale Saturday, So I guess that's kind of, I'm sure there's more out there, but that's kind of the range of different things that I think about. And so then it's kind of, so are some of those okay? Some of those categories okay? And if so, are they okay everywhere? Or are they okay only in some districts? Or does what we allow on the highway commercial district on 102, maybe that's different than what we allow on 3A. So that's the kind of thing to think about.
Right.
One way to do it too is I can puck around with some of the regulations is just kind of like, as you're driving around, now that you've got electronic signs on your mind, you can start to see some other examples out there and think, oh, well, that makes sense, or that's okay, or gosh, I don't want that in our community.
Going off of the feedback that we got for the community design chapter, it sounds like anything more than just say replacing like the town hall sign so that it's easier to change. I don't know that there would be that many people that would really want anything flashy at all in the town. I think it sounds like what Merrimack has written here is pretty close to what I would expect as feedback for what kind of electronic signs people in the town want, going off of what, with the community design chapter, however you wanted to keep that, farm town, agriculture, aesthetic. We don't want it to be flashy billboards or anything anywhere in the town. But
at the commercial zones, they might want to leave their sign up all night, right, for advertising.
Right. Well, I'm saying
Like CVS,
the
you see
public
something like that.
feedback, I don't think the public would want.
Even on the
Based
business
off of
zones,
this.
you don't think so?
Not something that's like animated and flashing, I wouldn't think. But I could be, I don't want to.
No, I agree with that, but
Speak for everybody,
they
but
might want to sign
that's the
it
feel that
on
I
during
got.
the night for advertising, right? Like when you go by and you see CVS, it's, you could see.
Oh yeah, this
CVS.
isn't saying that you can't have it illuminated. This isn't whether it's illuminated or not. It's whether
Yeah.
whether it changes.
Whether it's moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
It changes, right?
So-
And so,
But something like this every 20 minutes sounds like it wouldn't be too fast and would be something that would fit in with the feedback that at least felt pretty strong in the.
Well, most of the signs
Design
here,
chapter.
we had the live free or die mentality, right? Remember everyone had such a wide range of signs on 3A. But yeah, I agree. But
so is that
is it a law? I don't know what the legal law is either.
I think that's
They
the
can
thing. We
have
don't
them.
have one.
is it the argument to restrict the signage because of the flashiness, or that we don't want the Las Vegas feel coming?
Well, we
Yeah,
don't
really.
have anything written at all right
least in the
now. So
residential.
it's like, what do we want to put
Right
into-
now, we do have no flashing, no sign, we say no flashing.
Oh,
As
I
far as
realized it said no flashing too on there.
We had nothing to address electronic signs. A couple of the places on 3A did want them, because at 3A, remember, the speed is up there, so they want, and what about size on these two?
That's something else to think about. Nashua does have some restrictions. And of course, we have sign limits on signs generally. Nashua has some, I think, on the percentage of the sign that can change, if I am correct.
Said,
It's not like a light pollution thing. It's more of a preference of the feel and the aesthetics of the town, right?
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
yeah, from the feedback that we got in previous chapters, they want to keep that agricultural town aesthetic, and like a rotating sign and everything wouldn't fit that.
Right. So Nashua says, to that point, they don't allow the electronic changing portion of the sign to exceed 50% of the sign area. Or they say 52 square feet, whichever is less, but needless to say, we don't allow signs that large, so. So it's possible to do that
Yeah, that's a good
also.
idea.
I can't even picture what that means. 50%. Say that again.
So, okay,
Sign is
so
the
if you
size.
have a sign,
Yeah.
not more than half of it can be changing.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was just noting that they say, or 52 square feet, whichever is less, and I don't think we allow signs
No,
over
we don't.
100 square feet, so
No.
that wouldn't be an issue here. So, I mean, but those are things that we could also look at. Probably the one that jumps to my mind most frequently is if you go out 101A and you go by the mortgage specialists,
Yes,
that's
You know what to do.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
probably not what we want. Yeah.
Keno is here.
So it's just,
Maybe they do.
I mean, we can give it some. My gut is you're probably right. I think we're probably looking at something closer to the Merrimack example that allows you to have a message. It allows it to change, but not change frequently, not be animated, not be. But we can give it some thought. But
Everyone that doesn't mean
remembers
that's how we
the
have to
mortgage
go.
Specialist, though.
everyone remembers the mortgage specialist.
Like devil's advocate.
Great visual aid, right?
Right.
Mainly because they ended up in court with it.
Yes, more than once. So, but the key with all these, and it's just the one thing to always remember with signs is we can regulate the appearance of the signs and the size of the signs, and but what we can't regulate is content. So that's just, and in this case, we wouldn't be. This is agnostic. So. So this is one to look at. I can look at some more examples, but I do think it's really worth kind of driving around and looking. There are more examples of it than I realized, because I just haven't paid attention until it's an issue before you, so you pay attention. So the other one, so there are a couple more out there that I am working on, but I was not ready to pull it together tonight. One was the issue that was brought forward from the zoning board, which was changing the special exceptions to conditional uses. That required a little bit more crafting because it's in so many places. So I will do that for the next time. I didn't get to that this time. So along the lines of an issue comes up and we realize we don't address it. I also threw one in there on campers. So the issue is what happens when a friend or a relative with an RV wants to come visit you, park in the driveway, and stay for some period of time? Is that allowed or not? We're silent on that issue. And surprise, surprise, it's come up. So I will say in most of the communities I've worked in, they are silent on the issue, and the tendency is to ignore it unless there's a problem or a complaint. And so I will say I know people who do this. They're retired. They travel around the South, and when they come visit their family up here, that's what they do. They park the RV in the driveway. So nevertheless, we may or may not want to address this issue in any way, but I throw it out there. I did find in researching around. So Nashua does actually have a provision on it. And I thought it was interesting. They do allow it. You have to get a permit. They allow it for a period of not to exceed 30 days. It has to be a non-paying guest, so it can't be something that you use for a business. And importantly, the health officer is involved. In their case, the plumbing inspector, because they have a plumbing inspector. But the key is that it's licensed. They're able to, or I should say, permitted. They're able to track, the length of time that it's there, and make sure that it's appropriately hooked up to facilities. Because that's really your other, from a public safety point of view, that's really the biggest issue. As do they have access to potable water and what's happening to the waste? So again, I don't know that we want to do anything with it. It's come up. I throw it out there.
Just thinking accessory dwelling unit.
No.
Well, it's
And
for 30
temporary
days, though.
structure, we still have to talk about.
Yeah, right. But that's true. But that is kind of part of the rationale of having a permit is you're able, one, you're able to track it. You make sure that it's safe. You make sure it doesn't stay there for too long. Otherwise, yeah, you don't know what the scenario
It's
is.
just visiting campers though, not if you have your own camper.
That's right. This is for somebody visiting and staying in the camper. That's what this addresses. So not something that comes up all the time.
It has come up and we don't
It has
have,
come
and we don't have anything on the books
Right.
to address it.
It has come up. Okay.
Well, it has come up and nothing was done about it.
So just curious, how does it come up?
It comes up because somebody does it, because that
Because
relative.
the neighbors don't like campers in the
complaint.
backyard and
It comes
people living
up.
there.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's usually a complaint.
Okay.
And then you realize you don't have something on the books. So now what do you do? How do you enforce it? And you can look at the ordinance and you can come up with a way. And one way could be, we don't allow it. That's an alternative. I found this as an interesting example of a way of allowing it yet controlling it, but that's not to say that that's the best way to do it. It could be that, we simply want to say you can't do that in Litchfield.
Yeah, I think that not allowing it's not the answer.
Yeah. I mean,
There's
and
too many
maybe,
of them.
yeah, I mean, it may be 30 days is too long. Maybe
Why
it's
does
a
it
different
think it
period.
was too short?
Maybe it's too short. So
Come up for a season or something?
some people do.
Yeah.
Some people do it for a season.
Mhm.
So again, we don't have to do anything with it now, but I think it's something to think about. We have a couple more out there that we're looking at. So one of the things we have to think about is are some of these issues that we want to tackle at all at this point. And the other thing to ultimately think about is how many warrant articles do we want to bring forward? Because you don't want to risk overwhelming voters. So that's just, and again, that's my bias. I tend to think you want to be judicious in what you actually bring to the voters. So
I think if we can do like 2 or
Three,
3 is the
two,
limit,
yeah,
you know.
I think that's probably about the right balance. And, so we can kind of look at these. We have time, starting early. We're not under the gun. So it gives us a chance to think some of these things through and then choose the priorities that make the most sense.
There was something else. I went to the zoning and planning conference on Saturday in Concord. One of the issues that interesting came up, tiny houses
Yes.
is an issue that is raising popularity. And I think this is because there's a certain case out of, I think it's Hampton Falls, New Hampshire, where this woman moved back to New Hampshire and put this structure on wheels on property and basically said, this is my home and I'm moving in. And the town was like, well, you got some issues in terms of, so I guess the town has been trying to work with her to solve that. But I mean, and the issues being, number one, it's a structure on wheels. It's not a permanent structure. How do you tax it? How do you do this? How do you do that? So there are, these tiny home issues are something that's starting to pop up, and it might be something to look at.
Absolutely. We could certainly look at it. It is an issue that's popping up.
So that was one of the things that they talked about.
And the other thing I mentioned before about I'll have to check on the status of the bill is the changing definition of agriculture.
Right. They did also mention that at the, and also too, something about private, I don't know if this really applies to us, but private roads and maintaining private roads. If you have a common road, some towns have, roads where they're roads, but they're private. They're not public, accessible to the public, but there are houses there. And should those, who should be responsible for maintaining them? I know that's a bill that's.
Yeah, there's a bill that's proposed on
Was
that.
proposed on that,
I
so
don't think we have those
I
here.
can't think of that, but.
We have private roads and developments where they're controlled,
Right,
but I don't think we have that here. You have it in a few circumstances. Usually it's older developments and camp lots or an old road that accessed a couple farmhouses.
And I guess the issue too is, okay, how is that different from, common driveways or easements and things of that nature? There may be issues there. How do you define it? But that's a whole, whole issue. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up because I know that was talked about, and those are things that might be of interest.
It's never a problem until it's a problem.
There you go, as you say. So, okay, anybody have any further questions for Jay?
Are we still gonna do the temporary structure? Try to attack that one, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, that's on the site plan reg side, and I've got a couple more things I wanted to talk about on that, but
Next time, yeah.
yeah, we can give that some thought.
That's good. Cool. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Jay, for that input on that. Let's see here. Next on the agenda. I just lost. How did I lose it? Where'd it go? Hold on. I lost it. My computer for some reason.
I have it.
Number
Paper
4.
copy.
Thank
would
you.
like?
Yeah, release of, number 4, release of escrow funds to Richard Jefferson subdivision Route 3A, approved on August 17, 2018, recorded at the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds, October 16, 2018. Joan, is this?
Right, it's the subdivision on 3A, and it wouldn't need any more inspections. When we get a building inspector, if they build on it, then he would be going according to plan.
Okay, so are you recommending that we release the funds? Okay. So I guess there's a recommendation to release funds for this subdivision of Richard Jefferson Route 3A. I'd entertain a motion. If someone wants to entertain a motion to release the escrow funds.
I'll make the motion to release the funds for Mr. Jefferson. Unfortunately, the late Mr. Jefferson.
Okay, yes, that's right. I have a motion. I have a second. Do I have discussion? All right. All those signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstained?
Abstain. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, the motion passes 4-0-1. Okay. Committee reports. Any reports from any committees? The local Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee is meeting this month. I think it's the 24th of June. It's Thursday, 7 p.m. at the National Public Library. The Conservation Commission is meeting this week. They have a meeting on Thursday at 7 p.m. I'll be attending that one. So,
The ZBA is meeting June 12th.
and what is that?
ZBA,
ZBA
Zoning
June
board.
12th.
and they have about 4 cases.
Okay. Wow. All right. Anything from NRPC or?
2 things are in RPC. Our full meeting, I believe, is June 19th, our quarterly meeting. And the second item is I visited your new facility, and it was wonderful.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, and I hope you had a good turnout.
We did. Yeah, it was nice.
Heritage Commission, we heard back from the lawyer on the bylaws that the Heritage Commission had initially passed. There were 2 minor changes, very minor. One was we put single and one in plural, and one was having extra members on the alternate members. We have our meeting next Tuesday, and if they agree to those changes, we'll have that, and we'll finally have the Heritage Commission bylaws up. And then the Historical Society, not a town, department, but we had the Memorial Day Parade, and it went very well. A lot of planning involved with that.
Nice. Okay. All right. Any other committee reports from anybody? All right. Moving on. Approval of the May 7, 2019 minutes. Did anyone have a chance to take a look at those? And have any questions? I didn't see anything. Pretty good. If nobody has any questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes
I have a
from
motion,
May 7th.
motion to approve minutes of May 7th, 2019. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Do I have any discussion? Okay, all those signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstained? Motion passes 500. Okay, great. Let's see, any other business? Joan, do we have anything else?
No, we have a case coming in on the 18th
Okay,
that will be noticed this Friday. And, yeah, it's just one case coming in.
okay. Very good. Jay, anything? Any other business?
I did have some correspondence. I don't know if you want to know about that.
Okay, no, go ahead. Mhm.
I think I sent this out to everybody from Brent Cole from Granite Engineering.
Oh, yes, I did see that.
He had left,
Yeah.
Keith Nordstrom, I think he was with. And he and Jeff Merritt started their own company. It was interesting that a planning board can require a third-party inspection during construction. So that was interesting.
Now, is there a bill in the legislature? Isn't that something to talk about, a bill in the legislature? that
No,
would-
this is Senate Bill 152 would amend RSA 674-4 to read a planning board approval of a subdivision plat, site plan, or other land use application may require the applicant to reimburse the board, which we do. It would change it. A planning board that requires third-party inspection during the construction process shall develop a scope for the project inspection and solicit proposals for 3 or more qualified firms and select the lowest bidder that meets the requirements outlined in the request for proposal. So I guess the applicant could,
If the bill passed, I have to check the
Yeah.
status of it. I'm not sure the status of that bill.
it says again, this bill is currently being considered, but has not yet been approved.
Right.
So they're just advertising a Senate Bill 152 is approved. We would be happy to help you with the proposal for inspection services.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
They're definitely thinking ahead. It's wonderful. They're thinking to do that.
There, well, yeah.
It's very
You're
entrepreneurial.
you're out on your own with your new firm.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
That's
Proactive,
good.
so good
Yeah,
for
definitely
them.
proactive though, yeah.
And then I don't know if you want to go over Mel's Funway cease and desist because they may or may not come for a plan amendment. So I don't know if you want to get into that or not.
I guess I need to know a little
Issue
bit more about it.
It's Thursday.
Can we copy
And I have
the
2
letter and
items after.
circulate it?
so.
Yeah, I can copy it and
Yeah,
circulate
okay,
it.
why
too.
don't you do that?
Be a better idea.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay, great. Jay, do you have anything else you want to add? Okay. As I said, I did attend the zoning and planning conference in Concord. It was very well attended. They had some great presentations. They did a great job with talking about the updated legislation and this different case law. And one case in particular that they did touch upon, which I think if anybody gets a chance to read it, I think it would be worthwhile, is Dartmouth versus Hanover. That involved actually the Hanover Planning Board and a case that came before the Hanover Planning Board regarding Dartmouth College. And I think it's a great case, not because of not so much, well, the legal aspect, but also to show how planning boards deal with issues that come when abutters have issues and what the planning board has to consider. I think it's a very good case to look at and read and to kind of reflect upon, because there are issues that do come up in site plan review and in subdivision review. And, when abutters come before us, they have serious concerns, and there were serious concerns in this case. And, even though the town of Hanover did not fare well in that case, I think also too, I think it's a good lesson that, we don't necessarily, when we make these decisions, that we have to take into consideration our regulations, and how we approach that is important. So I think it's a pretty good read if you get a chance to read it, and it is about the planning board process. So And I think the New Hampshire Supreme Court has really, basically said, planning boards, you need to do your job. And that is basically looking at everything that comes before you, not basing it on your personal feelings, not basing it on personal preference, but on the regulations and statutes and things. And I think it's a good case to look at. So it was a good thing to bring up. And also too, they did touch upon a lot of stuff, like I talked about the tiny housing issue, and the 5G. That was also brought up. Did mention that. So there are, these are things that looking into the future that you might want to think about. And as a board, what are these issues are sort of in the limelight right now. So they're.
And if you Google Dartmouth v. Town of Hanover, it comes right up.
It does. It does.
So this was Dartmouth College not agreeing with the planning board of Hanover and then taking them to court?
Yes.
In
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to build a training facility at Dartmouth that abutted a community neighborhood that basically did not want it built simply for the fact that they would not, because it would cause problems with sunlight because the building was so huge. That was one of the issues anyway. There was they did shadow studies. They did all kinds of stuff that they felt that this was something that they just didn't want to build because they were going to not have any winter sunlight coming into their area. The planning board went through the process, but and I think if you read the decision, I think this it was almost like it was more based on there's more of this feelings piece to it than there is the regulatory piece to it. And I think it's important to realize that as a planning board, our responsibility is also to take into consideration, what the abutters have to say, but also to, what the ramifications are, because eventually Hanover denied I believe denied the application. And basically it got to the Superior Court, which affirmed that denial. And then it got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't just base it on, your observable feeling or your feelings or what you believe that it is. You have to base it on what is in the regulations or in your regulations and findings. And so it's a good test case, because it talks about what we do as a board. And so, I mean, it's not just the legal value, but, the planning board value in terms of, how planning boards operate. And I think it's just a good example of that. So just thought I'd throw it out there. So. But anyway, that's my spin. All right. So yes.
I have two, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
The first one should be easy. And
right.
do we need a secretary clerk role assigned now that we have people?
We could.
Do you want to
We
do that
certainly
maybe next
could do
time?
that.
Or a secretary clerk role.
I think
We don't
because
have
the last time
we don't have
a
we
secretary.
lost members,
Yeah.
and I think
So I don't know if you want to do that.
Probably agenda. You probably want to agenda it.
You want to do
Yeah.
that for the next
Yeah,
meeting?
okay.
So is that meeting minutes and keep
No, Joan does a great job, but if she's not here one night,
Yeah,
we have a
sometimes,
sidewalk, sometimes we need that
yeah,
person to do it.
it's not really. I mean, it's more of a. It's a name only, really. But basically, yeah, it's like a clerk of the works position.
Pitches only,
Basically.
just pitches.
Just pictures.
When the planning boards didn't have
I'll give you the order in a second.
staff or anything, they would basically have a clerk. of
We'll
the
go over
works
them
who would
together, they're just pictures.
Take notes and minutes of the meetings.
But it's also the person who's theoretically officially responsible for the records of the.
Right, the record. It's the official.
And if the chairman and vice chairman are absent, then it's supposed to get
We'll
down.
go over these in a second.
Are
I gave
these-
you a couple sets for everybody.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
should
may-
you get the old phones on the front page? Will be the first one. Everybody got the old phone? Old phones.
Yes.
And then you're gonna have these little three pop-up windows on the second.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you're gonna have this other lawsuit that had a problem with 5G. Okay, so should be four. One with the cell phones.
Yeah.
The old 2G
Yeah.
technology.
That's
One with the three pop-ups like this.
Yeah.
Will be next.
I think I've got them all individually.
Got the three pop-ups. So it's the phones,
3 pop-ups.
2G, yeah. And you got the three pop-ups, and then you have the lawsuit with Sprint.
I only have,
Are you missing the lawsuit? And then
I'm missing
the,
the pop-ups.
you're missing the pop-up. Here you go. You can have mine. You can have mine. All right, so we can go over these just quickly. I had a person reach out to me in town who was concerned about a 5G cell tower approved in Londonderry. I quickly texted her back saying, I believe we follow the federal regulations anyway, but let me check with the board because I realized I shouldn't be having a meeting outside of a meeting. We need to be all here. So that's why I want us to just discuss what 5G is. And just so I can give her a response from the whole board, not me, going in my own direction. I did look up our zoning ordinance 1050. It is about telecommunication facilities, but I just briefly read it. I'd probably do a more deep dive next time. So we do have something on the book, but it's for the older technology. So what is 5G? 1G, we're on the first handout here, right? 1G was the old analog cell. Okay. A 2G network was when we started to have the mobile phones and you could start to do text messaging. You can see that happening, right? 3G was when the mobile phones first came out. We had higher data transfer and we could maybe share images. 4G we have today. Higher data transfer rates on your phone. You can do the movies and all of that going on. What 5G, because I have to first I had to find out what 5G meant, right? We can answer it. 5G is going to be the next generation of wireless, quicker downloads. Okay, it's supposedly going to be how we change. It's going to have the autonomous cars and all of that. Okay, so next page, what I'm finding out is the older technology on number 1 and 2, they kept those frequencies now. They bought them all. And what they're going to do is if you go to the second page, go to my second one with the 3 pop-ups. If you go to the second page, you're going to see the frequencies. See how they're slow on the 4G network, and they get faster on the 5G network. You see how that's happening? So right now, they already bought up the old frequencies from the older technology. They're ready. Well, they're getting ready to deploy it when it's going to roll out. Now the data comes at you a little slower. Now they're going to hit you, allowing more data, more networks on the, more, they call them highways. They might use more antennas, but they're going to start to get it to you more rapidly. And it's supposed to also connect to all your computers, whether it's the car, the computer, your phone, a lot more connectivity where you're going as well. So it's going to be higher data coming at you and connecting any device around you is what they're aiming to do. So what I'm finding out through my reading, because she was concerned about the cell tower as a health issue of this high frequency. So I don't think that's the planning board's issue. I don't, but I'm here to find out. I think we really have to do what the feds say, but I just want us to make sure. So I just want you to, the third handout is, this happened recently. AT&T sued Sprint because Sprint, I guess it was showing up on your phone that you had a 5GE. I'll get into that in a minute. So you thought you had 5G technology, but you didn't. You were really running on a 4G phone. So this whole article is proving that it really isn't here yet. So I don't think we have rules for it yet. And I'll get into what that means in a second. So 5GE is a prerequisite to 5G. They're just really running 4G 2 times faster. They're just getting ready to really start to get to the 5G later, okay? But we're still running on the old 4G. Again, she's calling me about 5G. I went on to the federal website. This is the last handout, the Federal Communications Commission. They are setting policy now, and there's a lot of papers on the back you can read. It's only been rolled out in 11 cities as an experiment. It really isn't going anywhere yet, but they plan on it for the next year or so to maybe 16 more rollouts or 30, I forget the number.
Including Boston.
So it's not here yet. So she called about the Londonderry one thinking they were setting it up. Obviously, it's not here yet. The feds are still writing the requirements. So I don't think we have anything in our regs for it anyway. But this is just my own research. But I think we just have to answer her something,
So-
vote or something.
What's the concern that with 5G?
The health issue.
Oh,
Because the high frequency coming off of those towers could be a health risk. And she is finding reports where it has happened. But again, I don't know. Yeah. That's not my role. I don't know who she would go to with that. But she would want to come in with proof. But again, I don't think that's really the planning board issue.
Agreed. I think though that, she should be thanked for bringing the issue to us. I think it's clearly something that has to settle out, and I think before the planning board could realistically do anything, we'd need to see what the federal rules
Right.
wind up looking like, so that we have an understanding of the context. But it is coming. It's something that we should be paying attention to.
Right. So that's my research of what I found. It's what it's going to do. We're still leveraging our 4G. We might have it at top speed called 5GE evolution, but we're not there yet. And we won't be yet because we only have these 11 satellites happening.
so
But it is going to be coming.
Is it about new infrastructure being put in place too?
No,
Like
but,
new
because we
towers?
have regulations on towers anyway. But I think she's worried about the health risk of that I don't know if it's RF frequency, but the high frequency coming off of health risks about that. She's studying those 11 cities and seeing some case studies on that, but yeah. So you just want to see, you want me to answer her back and I can CC everybody or do you want me to, yeah, as long as you keep her name private, she didn't want to be.
And the
Okay.
answer is we have to wait.
We have to wait, and then we really have to follow with the federal regulations, which are
Yeah.
being formed now.
But I think
Alright.
it's something, I would imagine something we do want to continue to follow the issue as it develops.
I think one of the things that came up at the planning conference was the size of these towers that they're building now. They're going to be a lot smaller if they're going into this 5G. I think that's what they kind of focused on, and how can for towns to think about okay, how you regulate that, but but that's down the road. I mean, but certainly it's something I think that we
Yeah, there are other people worried about how to tax it.
I think she said it was approved on the Londonderry Litchfield line. That's why she was questioning.
We
I
would've-
don't know. Wait,
we
I tried to
would've been-
Google it. I couldn't.
We would have been noticed. They have to notice within 25 miles on a tower.
From what I looked at, you have to register your own tower with them anyway. There was a fee you paid because I looked at the own towers in Londonderry, and you could see the list of names. And the handout I gave you, they tell you how to register your tower. I didn't see any name that stuck out saying Verizon or Sprint. It could be a subsidiary or something, but yeah. So I understand her concern, but I just want to make sure how we as a board, we really have to follow the rules and regulations, whatever they are. So everyone agrees with that? We'll just let her know that.
keep it on the radar. Okay. Anybody have anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have discussion? All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained. Motion passes 5-0-0. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we'll see you next time. Good night.